Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Taylor Combluzzi. I'm mining analyst at Red Cloud Securities. Today's webinar features Jindalee Lithium, which is advancing the McDermitt Project in Oregon, one of the largest lithium resources in the U.S. The 2024 PFS confirmed its potential as a large-scale, long-life, no-cost source of U.S.-made lithium chemicals. Its recent designation as a Fast 41 transparent project underscores McDermitt's strategic importance to the U.S. Jindalee owns 100% of the project and signed a US $500 million SPAC LOI, providing a pathway to a US listing intending to advance the Jindalee study. Today I have with me on the webinar Ian Rogers, who's the MD and Chief Executive Officer of Jindalee Lithium, as well as Lindsay Dudfield. The format of today's webinar will be Ian and Lindsay will provide an update on Jindalee. And the second part, we'll take your questions live. So please submit your questions using the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. Type your questions in at any point throughout the presentation. The start will handle the disclosures and then get into the presentation. But for Jindalee Lithium, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to a cautionary note on page 2 of the Jindalee corporate presentation locally on the company's website. The Red Cloud Securities Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation of sell securities or recommendation to buy or sell security. We note that this call does not take into account the particular or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations for only professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Jindalee specific disclosures. So with that out of the way, I'll turn it over to Ian and Lindsay to discuss Jindalee and what investors have over to capital.
As mentioned by Taylor, purpose of today's presentation is really to provide investors with an update on Jindalee, fill you in on the progress we've made over the last couple of months, and in particular focusing on some of the details around our recently announced LOI with Constellation Corp to list the McDermitt Lithium Project in the United States, which we're very excited to run you through today. On the call today is also Lindsay Dudfield. He's Executive Director, and for people that have been following the story, they would recognize his name. He's our largest shareholder and founder, and will provide his perspectives on the way through the presentation today. For those with less familiarity with the Jindalee story, we've been a listed company for 23 years with a track record as prudent manager of capital, and that track record's really key and guides our strategy. We've got a very tight capital structure. Currently, only about 80 million shares on issue. As at June 30, we had about $4 million in the bank Australian. Lindsay, I mentioned, our biggest shareholder, owns about a quarter of the company. Top 20 hold about 70% of the stock. Primarily high net worth investor base with institutions that have been in and out of the stock. You can clearly see the stock had bottomed out at about 20 cents towards the tail end of last year. We're currently trading. This presentation was out on the eve of our recent deal. We're now trading in the order of 50 to 60 cents. So we'll come off those lows, but still really compelling valuation and really got the capital structure that's tight and reflecting of people that have really managed it well. Next slide, please. So why Jindalee? A bit of a recap on the Jindalee story. At the core, very strategic asset, one of the largest lithium deposits in the United States. Our PFS, which was completed in November last year, outlines a very large, long life source of American-made battery-grade lithium carbonate, and really importantly, it's the mining and the processing to produce the end product in the United States. That's the key strategic differentiator of our project, that and its size. It's located adjacent to Thacker Pass in the McDermitt caldera. That's obviously quite relevant at the moment with the news flow from Lithium Americas in the last 48 hours about the federal government, the US federal government taking an equity position in both the project and the corporate level, providing a strong endorsement of how critical that project is to the US lithium space, and a really, as a project that's at a similar size and style, the look through for us is very positive. The other key thing about the asset is, potential for, material co-products, and I'll touch on that in a second. In terms of the lithium market, look, the lithium, we're coming out of a lithium winter, emerging out of multi-year lows. Demand growth has been very strong, which I'll touch on, and we're one of the few advanced projects in the US that is set to capture this uplift as the cycle improves. In terms of government support, we've been able to demonstrate that we're one of the first 10 projects added to the US Fast 41 initiative. We signed the Department of Energy, Cooperative Research and Development Agreement last year, and we're well positioned to capitalize on recently announced funding coming out of the one big beautiful bill. Lastly, we've got a really strong pipeline of news flow and catalysts ahead of us. The key one, obviously, that I'll talk about today is related to the SPAC transaction. We're at the early stages of that, but there's potential for a material re-rate clearly as we progress this transaction and look to recognise that much higher look-through valuation than our current market cap on the ASX. Additionally, we're pushing forward numerous work streams at McDermitt with a major permitting milestone expected towards the end of this year. And then also as we take steps in preparation for a feasibility study, we expect to commence next year, that there's going to be strong news flow out of the project. Moving on to the next slide, please. Recapping our PFS highlights. Very long life, 63-year project life with a 47,500 tonnes of lithium carbonate production capacity in the first decade. Low cost production, bottom half of the cost curve, highly competitive with North American peers. Really, that 63-year life is just the tip of the iceberg. That's only about 15% of the resource base. And in a lot of ways, this project, from an economic sense, looks like a copper porphyry. Strong forecast cash flows, large investment, but high margin annuity style cash flows over a very long period of time. The other key points to make on this slide is really we've had very high quality work done as part of the pre-feasibility study, with Fluor Corporation managing our test work and completing the engineering and cost estimation. And that's part of our strategy, given the size of the asset and the partners we're looking to attract. The other key point I'd make is there's lots of opportunities for further enhancements. We completed this through the bottom of the cycle on a pretty limited budget. We didn't include a lot of the trade-off optimization work that you would normally include. And so we see a lot of opportunity to improve capital intensity and operating cost, but also the potential to unlock other material co-products, in particular magnesium, which we hope to provide more color on in due course. As touched on earlier, McDermitt was one of the first 10 projects added to the Fast 41 transparency list. You can see that we're in really good company there with the other major projects in the US listed on this page. Why does it matter? It really underscores McDermitt's potential role in the US critical mineral strategy, reinforces confidence in the permitting pathway and really strategic relevance. And most materially in the short term, it really helps our advancement of the exploration plan of operations, which is this key permitting milestone I mentioned earlier, as we expect the end of this year, which is a key to unlocking a much larger infill drilling program, which will underpin test work and resource confidence as part of the feasibility study. Next slide, please. Onto the SPAC transaction. I think the context here is key. Since April, we've been evaluating a range of strategic alternatives to unlock value from McDermitt. This process generated multiple proposals from different SPAC groups in particular, and after careful consideration, we've then entered into this LOI with Constellation. We've worked closely as part of this process with our US advisors. Constellation was selected not only because their proposal was the most commercially attractive, but also their sponsor, Antarctica Capital, is a multi-billion-dollar US fund, and they're expected to contribute capital alongside the transaction, and that's really key because the objective of the part of the objective of this SPAC transaction is to fund, the next stage of work at McDermitt to unlock the feasibility study. While this remains a non-binding LOI, we have taken a more cautious and thorough approach than is typical at this stage. I think that's the other side would attest to that, and that's been quite deliberate. We're a listed company, clearly, and we wanted to do a lot of the work up front to understand the pathway through this, and whether we thought this would be the most value accretive way to unlock capital out of the US. In terms of the structure of the transaction, the proposed structure is a merger between our US subsidiary Hi-Tech and Constellation to form a new US listed entity, as you can see in that bit of a pictogram there. As part of the transaction, a US $20 to $30 million capital raise is targeted to fund, like I said, the advancement of McDermitt, in particular the feasibility study. Management will be shared across Newco and Jindalee, ensuring continuity and alignment, and Jindalee will is expected to retain at least 80% ownership of that US listed entity, and which will list upon completion of this transaction, most likely on the NASDAQ, but on a US national exchange. In terms of strategic rationale, look, our strategy has always been to Americanize McDermitt. The natural owners of this project are US investors, and this transaction provides a pathway to achieving that. The structure also provides a less dilutive way to raise the capital to progress McDermitt while still preserving Jindalee's majority exposure. It also provides us with a stronger platform to tap future US government support programs. We've had good engagement to date, and this I think will help unlock more, as well as allowing a better platform to access project financing, and ultimately the significant capital required for development in a couple of years' time. In terms of the pathway forward, we're at the LOI stage now. The next key milestone is a binding business combination agreement, which we expect to work through over the coming months. We have a 90-day exclusivity period as part of the LOI that was announced a couple of weeks ago, in which to complete confirmatory due diligence and finalize that agreement. In parallel, we'll be undertaking marketing to potential SPAC investors to participate alongside Antarctica in that $20 to $30 million raise. And as part of the transaction, Antarctica is expected to commit US $4 million to that raise and cornerstone that. And that will allow us to get confidence around funding prior to proceeding through that VCA stage. Assuming the VCA is signed in December quarter, which is our guidance, the process will move into the regulatory phase, which is expected to take around 6 months. So targeting completion late first half calendar year 2026. While there can't be any guarantee transaction will complete, I think it's fair to say both counterparties, Jindalee and Constellation, are strongly aligned and motivated to see it succeed, and we're excited to progress this transaction. And while I'm on this slide, Lindsay, did you want to add any comments on this one?
And look, the transaction values McDermitt at $500 million US. We're currently, our market cap is around $30 million US. So there's a big uplift in value. But as Ian said, more importantly, those headlines look impressive, but really it's a way to raise capital in the United States from US investors to start that transition to fully Americanizing the project. And look, we've done, and really this is a spin out, and Jindalee's done several spin outs in the past. We've spun out a uranium company called Energy Metals that was very successful for our shareholders. We've had other spin outs, all of which our shareholders have had the opportunity to make money out of. Most recent was spinning out all of our Australian assets to focus on the McDermitt project that was completed January 23. A company called Dynamic Metals. So this is it's not unusual for Jindalee to spin out assets if it thinks there's better value to be achieved for shareholders by listing it separately. It's just to date we've listed all of our spin outs on the ASX, but the logical place for this project to list is the US, and so that's why we're embarking on this strategy.
Thanks, Lindsay. In terms of the market, just a quick recap. Following a period of high prices and increase in supply in 2022, we saw prices, significantly fall across the last 2.5 years, and we're just emerging from that 2-year downturn now. As a result, we're seeing analyst sentiment start flipping. We can see, Canaccord and UBS, the latter of which has been a bit of a perma bear in the lithium space, have sort of acknowledged the solid fundamentals and that the sentiment's shifting, and we're in the early stages of recovery. And so it'll be volatile, but I think the trajectory will be good from here. And the good news, or the best news, is that the market fundamentals are very strong and improving. Demand growth has been very strong. Electric vehicle sales, despite the headlines to the contrary, the fundamentals 28% year to date, and then battery storage over 50%. So very strong growth. On the supply side, prices have clearly been below incentive levels, with large capex deferrals, both in the West, but increasingly in China, which has been sticky. So we're starting to see that supply response, and people who've been around commodity businesses know what that's a recipe for strong growing demand and supply that's been a bit slow to respond. So emerging consensus really is that we'll see deficits as early next year, which will drive up prices. And it's important to highlight how much this has shifted. Analyst views has shifted. When the prices came off in 2023, the market, the analysts were saying that, forget the market, it's going to be in surplus until the end of the decade. That's gradually moved back as we've just seen strong demand growth. And so I see that as really, really positive. And, the crystal ball moment is when the market retires, we see movement in prices. But, the fundamentals are set. It's a matter of time, not if. And so really the scene is set for the next up cycle. There is clearly an opportunity for investors to gain exposure for those advanced projects like McDermitt, which are best placed to capture that upswing. And then we'd argue that our project, one of the more advanced in the US, and a lot of other commercial catalysts in the pipeline as well. So really, strongly positioned. In terms of the pathway ahead, the SPAC I touched on in the previous slide, the BCA is a key near-term milestone, and ultimately the listing. In terms of approvals, we're well advanced and expect BLM approval for our exploration plan of operations by the end of this year. As mentioned, this will allow us to do a much larger infill drill program. So assuming the SPAC deal goes as planned, we'll be in a position to execute on that infill drill program starting in the middle of next year and commence a feasibility study around the same time. In terms of the project, we're investigating potential. Can we move to the next slide? Sorry. In terms of the project, we're investigating potential for magnesium and other potential co-products. Part of that works through our research agreement with the Department of Energy, but also through other work, and we expect to provide some more color on that by the end of the year. And then likewise, I mentioned we've got potential government funding, grant applications afoot, and we're also reviewing new opportunities in that space. So in summary, highly strategic asset, one that's on the Fast 41, had buy-in from the Department of Energy through this cooperative research and development agreement, and poised well for further government engagement. We're cheap on any basis. There's a comparison chart later in the slide deck, but essentially we're cheap on any metric. And on top of that, the lithium market appears to have bottomed and poised for recovery over the next 12 to 24 months. So we really see an opportunity for asymmetric returns, for particularly as we look to unlock the value differential embedded in this SPAC transaction and continue to de-risk the project. So I encourage investors to put us on a watch list and follow us closely. With that, Lindsay, was there any final comments for you before we go to Q&A?
No, look, I think you've summed it up very well. And as Ian said, one of the appendices to this presentation, which you can view on the ASX, there's a peer comparison, and Jindalee, despite the recent uplift in value on announcing the SPAC transaction, we're still trading at about a quarter of the value of our peers per tonne of lithium carbonate equivalent in resource. And there's been recent research note last week came out, and it was written by an analyst from MST Financial, and that placed a value of $1.84 Australian on the company's shares versus around the 55-60 cent mark currently, and that was so. Look, there is plenty of upside still left in this transaction if we can pull off the in the company, if we can pull off the SPAC transaction as planned. We think there's a lot more upside yet to come for our shareholders.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ian and Lindsay. So now we'll turn to the Q&A portion of the webinar. Just a reminder to everybody on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So maybe we'll get started in terms of questions kind of on the project level here in terms of the permitting. My understanding is Oregon has a very kind of a prescribed permitting process with clear steps and timelines involved. Is that kind of the case that you're kind of working through that right now, and is that kind of your view on the state?
Yeah, I think the key point to make on the permitting front is it's on federal land. So the key permitting steps, through the lead permitting agency, and the key permitting steps are through the Bureau of Land Management, part of the U.S. Federal Department of Interior. So they're the key permits, and so we're working through the exploration plan of operations. Expect a record decision by the end of the year. Then the next step after that will be the mine plan of operations, which we're sort of gearing up for, which is another piece of work down the line. In terms of the Oregon side of permitting, that we've got good engagement with the local mines department, which is Dagami. We've got existing permits in place around exploration, and we have a pretty good understanding of the pathway to both close out our current exploration plan of operations permitting, but then also moving forward into the associated state level permits for the bigger permitting down the track.
Perfect. Okay. And I'm sticking with the kind of the states. The state representatives, how are they? How's their view kind of on the resource industry, and has there been any change with the federal change in administration on in states, and how that's dynamic played out?
Yep. I think we've been lucky to have a reasonable level of support from a range of different local political stakeholders. For example, part of our Department of Energy Cooperative Research and Development Agreement that was supported by one of the senior Oregon federal senator. The reality is that this is in a sort of very this region of Oregon / Nevada is quite disadvantaged, and so no matter what your political persuasion, there's a need for economic development, and lithium is really critical to a whole range of applications, and so we've had a pretty strong level of buy-in from a range of different political stakeholders. What I would say as well is that since the new administrations come in, what the difference we have certainly noticed is particularly with the addition of us onto the Fast 41, we've really noticed a pickup in the level of engagement with the federal permitting agencies. So that's been really positive as well. I think that's been a direct result of some of the initiatives from the new administration.
And if I can just add one more point, this project, if the PFS indicated a capex around $3 billion US, that would make it the single largest project ever built in a rural Oregon. So it is a significant project for the state as well as for the country.
Right. I assume good support from local communities in terms of the jobs and investment it would bring to those communities. Do you have good relationships with any local tribes or anything like that as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're having just completed the pre-feasibility study. We're relatively early in that process. That being said, we've been in the region since 2018 and have built relationships locally. We've certainly and it's on the public record. We've built relationships with tribal groups started to do work on the project, and that engagement is extending as we go forward with a range of different groups, looking to involve them both with the studies and helping shape some of the mitigation of our future work. So that there's strong level of engagement there. Hard to say anything to a lot of those points as it's confidential, but yeah, really strong engagement, I'd say.
Good. And in terms of you mentioned the agreements with the some of the federal agencies. Do you have any have applications been put in for funding opportunities from the DoD or Department of Energy or anything like that, or what stage is that avenue currently at?
Yeah, we've got a Department of Defense DPA grant funding application, which has a potential to co-fund a feasibility study at McDermitt. That has been in process for some time, and as the grant applications are becoming unfrozen post the change in administration, we expect there'll be more awards made in that space. From a Department of Energy perspective, and other departments, we've got a number of very well informed advisors we're working with around future funding proposals. What I would say is we're focused on near-term grant funding to help accelerate pre-development work, and less focused on the debt side. The near-term focus is really on these grant funding opportunities. I think the good news is that the big beautiful bill has unlocked significant funding for critical minerals in that space, and so we expect there's going to be a range of different opportunities for projects of national significance like ours.
Okay. And I'll just put out a final call for questions to the audience here. If you have any questions, please submit them into the chat as we're getting close to wrapping up here. Maybe another question here on the infill program that you're planning for kind of first half of next year. What would be the scale of that program? Do you have a rough idea on what that program would look like?
Yeah, we're still in the planning stage. It's going to be in the order of 50 to 100 holes. So quite significant infill drill program, and looking to couple of different objectives, but probably the biggest one is generating the sample for pilot scale test work. We've already got a significant reserve, but obviously we want to convert the indicated into measured, or a portion thereof, and up that reserve as part of the same process.
should point out too that the actual drilling program will be in the second half of calendar year 26. Our permit, doesn't permit us to drill before the 1st of July. So.
Okay. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions here. I don't know, Ian or Lindsay, if you have any final thoughts or final pitch for investors before we sign off here.
No, look, thank you for your attendance. Just I guess as a recap, encourage people to follow the story quickly. Really well placed asset, important to the US, improving lithium market, and a big valuation differential. So as we head into improving lithium market and execute on our plan, we see the potentials for really strong returns.
Perfect. So with that, I would like to thank Ian and Lindsay from Jindalee for taking the time today to host the webinar with Red Cloud Securities. And thank you to everybody for tuning in with us.